My name is Logan M. Isaac. I was in the Army 2000, 2006, got out as an E5 paratrooper and forward observer for the artillery. When I got out, I started pursuing higher education and uh, used the VA services across a couple of different states. Landed here about a year ago. And I'm really interested in the question of why some vets aren't self-identifying, and propose that there's another way to think about suicide prevention that isn't getting enough exposure, and that's civil rights. From the federal level on down, our civil rights as veterans, members, former members, military dependents are a hodgepodge of poorly enforced statutes, municipal codes. Here in the state of Oregon, we are not protected. The closest we come is employment under ORS 659A.082. Our neighbor to the south, California, recognizes military families as a fully protected class. However, at the federal level as well, veterans and military families haven't asserted those rights. They haven't we sometimes are surprised to learn that employment discrimination, housing discrimination is occurring, but we keep it silent because we've been taught to shut up and drive on. I think human dignity is the missing link, I suppose, for suicide prevention. I'd like to see Oregon come up to speed with California, and also encourage and advocate at the federal level for not just civil rights to be passed, but those laws that do protect us to be enforced. For example, the Hate Crime Prevention Act of 2009 included an entire section, sections 4712, that extended similar protections to service members, their families, up to 5 years after discharge. The Department of Justice at the federal level does not know about this law, has never enforced it, and its agents have no idea when I've called and asked for information. But it's been in place since 2009, and we still haven't gotten hate crimes protections for our community, because individuals who are targeted usually by what we'll call domestic terrorists. Domestic terrorism charges are easier to get a confession, conviction, but hate crimes are explicitly intended to protect our entire community. So individuals are getting spot check protections, but our community as a whole is falling through loopholes. I don't know how much time I have left, and I'll try and avoid identifying information. But there have been again, at the federal level, I'm only mentioning the federal because Oregon doesn't have a similar protection. It's called VEVRA, VEVRAA, is supposed to extend employment protections to veterans. However, its enforcement agency, the OFCCP, receives more complaints from veterans than any other complainant, and has since 2004. More veterans are complaining of employment discrimination to the Department of Labor than any other complainant, but veterans and VEVRA complaints are receiving the lowest record of findings of merit. It's essentially, the Department of Labor doesn't believe veterans when they complain of employment discrimination. 13 of those complaints since 2004 have come from the state of Oregon, because Oregon does not protect veterans from employment discrimination. Oregon does not protect from hate crimes or bias incidences either on paper. And I'd like to see that closed. And I'd like to see Oregon be an example for the federal level to not just put them in law, as California has, but to advocate for a comprehensive enforcement of veterans and service members' civil rights, to include the EEOC, which excludes veterans from its protection. The Department of Housing and Urban Development's Office of Fair Equity and Opportunity also excludes veterans. So, for example, income discrimination.
You have 1 more minute, sir.
Thank you. I know of a veteran who used his VA disability income to apply for an apartment. The apartment manager was very formal and T's crossed and I's dotted. That landlord didn't believe a federal document, the VA compensation letter that I receive as well. He held up that application for a highly sought over apartment. That represents income discrimination. There's no protection, but I think it's clear on its face that examples like these are affecting veterans every day. And I would like to think that Americans and Oregonians are willing to step up to the plate and start closing those loopholes. Thank you very much. Mm. Sure. If I could respond, I think what happened was atrocious. My father is a Vietnam vet. He was on the Enterprise for an enlistment that he volunteered for to avoid the infantry. And he never hid it from me or anybody in our family, but he also didn't talk about it. And I think what happens with my generation, the pendulum has swung. So thank you for your service has become, for me and most of the vets I talk to, which are mostly the kind of vets that Tina works with, it's a hollow sentiment, and it acts to just continue to conceal the fact that we don't know what to do with vets, and we haven't. And veterans, because it's a passable identity, I'll become a civilian and try and get whatever benefits that I should be deserving. I won't get into any of my personal case stuff here, but when civilians find out, they'll say that I'm hard to work with, and they'll have all these excuses for not giving me equal treatment. And the only facet I think I have is the law. So I can't pursue anything in Oregon. There's a case that I'm about to start in California, but it's incredibly subtle and sinister. And I don't think what happened to you has gone away. It's just changed form. I was a trained researcher and I've been a stay-at-home dad for 5 years, and that's what gave me time. And now I'm ready to step up and start forcing those loopholes closed if I have to.
Briefly, Logan, they are
Sure.
their way to that too. I'm just adding on very quickly to what our vice chair shared about our Vietnam veterans, which for those of us who are younger veterans, I myself am a veteran. I did not identify that at the beginning. I have a hard time identifying myself even now, but women veterans, LGBTQ plus veterans, also have challenges, and it is something that we should talk more about and do more about. We do have advocacy here, but there is a statewide issue in that regard, and a national issue in that regard. And so I want to acknowledge that is absolutely true. You mentioned civil rights, and I would very much like to just either myself or someone on my team follow up with you in that regard. But I'll share with you quickly, and this isn't a style, it's just for awareness. There is a civil rights division within the Department of Justice, small shop, but they do work and they actually have a crime hotline that I can try to get information to you about. And myself and my team are actually really closely working with the employment department. And I'm happy to bring up, and they may well be aware, but I'm happy to bring up in my next meeting with the director some of the employment discrimination points that he made. I can say that my son is an Army veteran, and he too has had issues finding positions that will take them and tell them that they're a veteran. And everybody here knows that's absolutely not supposed to be the case. So didn't share too much personally, but just to let you know, these are very important points, and I appreciate them.
If I may, just a closing remark, I learned as a white cishet male evangelical that bias and injustice are only as strong as their weakest link. The more I spoke up as a veteran, the more I was told to decenter myself as a white guy, as cis mass presenting, but this, if Martin said, threat to justice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere. And if there's a black veteran and say that landlord just didn't want to rent to black people, they could fully legally say every veteran is a baby killer, and that individual would have no recourse. And so a threat to justice anywhere is a threat to injustice everywhere. And I think it begins and ends with veterans here in our states. Thank you for letting me go on. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Logan.